Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. It is the 9th of June, and I'm flying solo tonight. I'm Kevin Hoare, and we have one hell of a show for you tonight. And I'm working on some guests for the coming couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. I think next a week from tonight, I should have Dave Huguenot, one of our every 2 months guests who talks to us about national politics, but knows Oregon politics too, and can share a lot of insights that, frankly, you can't get anywhere else. And then I'll let you know when I have more guests because, frankly, there's a lot going on and a lot of people we need to talk to, maybe to get some answers or at least get some clues as to why some of this stuff's happening that is happening. But let me start out at the top of the news here. The biggest story in the country right now, by far, is what's happening in Los Angeles. There is at least 6,000 people at last count, and I think it's increased from there, that are rioting, um, or as Democrats call it, peacefully protesting. I think Senator Booker from New Jersey said they're just peaceful protesters. You should just leave them alone. And if that were the case, then there would be no reason for the president to do what he's had to do, which is to protect federal facilities and personnel, such as ICE personnel. These are protests against raids that are taking place to remove hardened, hardcore, criminal illegal aliens, gang members, rapists, murderers, a long list of crimes that these folks have been involved with. And as President Trump would say, get them the hell out of our country. It is about time, and we can do it. And we will do it. Actually, there's no stopping President Trump and the administration from doing this, but it gets complicated from there because, of course, we have sanctuary states and we have Democrats who are completely and utterly, um, entirely betting on the political viability of protecting rapists and murderers who are here in the United States illegally, so that they can stay here as long as possible and enjoy the fruits of living in the United States, including a full set of rights and due process under the Constitution, to which they are not entitled under immigration law. So, um, yeah, and they are showing why they should be deported. And some of the dumbest people on earth seem to be involved with these protests, and I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Because to me, it's interesting that they show up by the thousands and they claim that this is all just terribly unfair. Uh, and it's terribly unfair to people who say what they really need is to be treated fairly so that their people can live a good life in the United States. And then they carry Mexican flags. I can't think of a dumber way. And we've seen this before. We've seen this movie before, actually. I can't think of a dumber way to make your point. And and I think the Democrats are going to suffer massively politically for this. Massively. Um, there aren't even people uh, that are Hispanic that are a majority behind the support of keeping criminal illegal aliens here. They want them the hell out of this country too. So it's a massive political miscalculation. And yeah, I agree, Lori. We're sending peaceful military in to deal with peaceful protesters. But the story really is that the state of California just refuses to provide protection for federal offices, facilities, and officers on in the territory of the state of California in this case. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm going to tell you what they really are doing, and it's kind of shocking, really, um, because it's super bad news if you're in a state where you can't do anything about what Democrats are doing. I think every state may change and become very different after we see the consequences of this. But I'm going to post. There's a great Fox News video that I think that shows in some detail and contrasts what you're hearing from Democrats versus what's really happening. And let me show you. This is one of the first nights. Too. I'm going to post this. This is one of the first nights that there were protests, and you can just see the plethora of Mexican flags, people wearing masks, and it's not because of COVID. It ain't. It's because they're trying to hide their identities. And they believe that they have a right to hide their identities and then trespass on federal property and attack police officers. One thing that's been made abundantly clear, well, first of all, President Trump has banned these masks as a legitimate activity during these protests, which we'll see how that one turns out. But he said, great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles after 2 days of violence, clashes, and unrest. We have an incompetent governor, Governor Newsom, and Mayor Bass, who were, as usual, just look at how they handled the fires, and now they're very slow permitting disaster. Federal permitting is complete. Unable to handle the task. That's what he wrote on Truth Social, and I just posted that article here. There are some clear warnings being given by the FBI director and the deputy FBI director. This one, I think, is from, let me see if I can get this one for you. The FBI has issued a warning that, and this is Dan Bongino, that if you assault a police officer, expect to do time, and that they should choose wisely as they do everything that they are doing. This is a major shift for the Democrats, further in the direction of the stuff that I guess they forgot that we went through 2020. We've seen this movie. We know how it ended when really there wasn't a lot of federal action. There were some threats of it. President Trump talked about it back then when he's running for re-election. By the way, not running for re-election now, but many Democrats have ambitions and they're trying to leverage this. In 2020, the militant wing of the Democrat Party took to the streets in the form of BLM and Antifa and did billions of dollars in damage, killed people, laid waste, burned entire sections of cities, and did so not in spite of the efforts of Democrats to stop them, but with the encouragement of Democrats in many cases. And now the Democrats are back at it, and they're doubling down on what they think was a fabulous political strategy that they think worked in 2020. But I know that in 2020, that simply made the election very close. And some of these Democrats are truly nuts. I'm going to get to them in a second. So President Trump has ordered 2,000 additional California National Guard troops, and so it brings the total now to 4,000. By the way, this has been done once before. Late 60s, Lyndon Baines Johnson activated them. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but it did relate to, I think it was to protect a civil rights protest from like racist people that were going to attack them. So the Democrats are all for that when it fits with their narrative as they see it. By the way, Republicans were the ones that were voting for civil rights legislation to protect minorities at that time. Those were Democrats that were actually assaulting and attacking those civil rights protesters back then. These are not now the protesters are violent. They're foreigners. They're illegally here in many cases. They're carrying foreign flags on American soil, and they're interfering with police law enforcement operations to remove hardened criminals from the United States. This is a very different situation, and one that I think is not going to look good for the Democrats in the long run. 500 Marines are prepared to deploy to Los Angeles. I think they might have already deployed. And this is to assist the California Army National Guard amid these violent protests. This is the 101 the main freeway going through Los Angeles has been brought to a standstill in in a city that was capable of doing that without the help of protesters. But now protesters are literally just going around and pissing off everybody that wants to get someplace on Highway 101. They said that these people are lighting cars on fire, including driverless cars, which I guess, I don't know. And they have been setting cars on fire in a historic neighborhood, actually. And so the authorities declared an unlawful assembly. We've heard that here in Portland many times, where former Mayor Ted Wheeler would declare an unlawful assembly, and the protesters wouldn't leave, and the police would try to arrest them, and the DA, Mike Schmidt, would fail to charge them or drop the charges. And yes, it was 1965, actually, is when Lyndon Baines Johnson sent the National Guard to Alabama to protect civil rights protesters without asking for the approval or permission or coordination, or frankly, over the objection of the governor. And this is what I'm going to tell you about in a minute, how the Democrats are responding. So, yeah, these are 500 Marines, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines from 29 Palms, California, and they are ready to protect federal property and personnel. So, this is what we didn't do back in 2020. And, we saw, 100 Days, the Summer of Love riots, Chaz, Madison, Wisconsin, the so-called flaming peaceful protests, that the media stood there and tried to claim that they were peaceful and with flames roaring in the background, mostly peaceful. And so, and we're only getting started here. Now, California and Gavin Newsom, he's thumping his chest. He did two things. One, he said California is going to sue President Trump over activating the state National Guard for LA protests. Gavin Newsom claims he's putting fuel on this fire, which the people were rioting and burning things. Gavin Newsom didn't take action. In fact, I saw on one of those TV reports I posted, there were some police actually got surrounded by protesters, and it took 2 hours for any other police to come and be ordered in to provide relief to those police officers that were surrounded. That tells you something right there. And I'll bet that the Democrats are really manipulating this situation badly. And now they're claiming that the illegal, immoral, and unconstitutional act is what President Trump's doing, and not the insurrection that the California governor, and I'm about to show you other Democrats, are fomenting. They're fomenting. And so we're going to see how this plays out. I don't know how it'll play out in court. I just know that the president definitely has the authority to deal with an insurrection, in effect, a rebellion, and that local authorities refuse to deal with, which is depriving, by the way, all law-abiding citizens of their rights. That's what's being lost and kind of forgotten to some extent in all of this. Now, also, Governor Newsom, has dared the Trump border czar Homan to, quote, arrest me over immigration enforcement, unquote. And Homan has said he vowed to arrest anybody who obstructs immigration enforcement. If that is what Governor Newsom or Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass are doing, then yeah, they should face arrest. And of course, he thinks he'll become some hero. But I think that he may find it very difficult to deal with what's going to come down on him in terms of federal law. And this is Newsom thumping his chest and talking like a tough guy. He goes, "Come after me, arrest me. Just let's get it over with, tough guy. I don't give a damn, but I care about my community, and I care about this community." You mean the community of hardened rapists and murderers that are here illegally? Well, that's your community. Then you can own it. right now. In fact, he should just turn himself over. What's he waiting for? Um, and he says that these guys need to grow up, all the people that are enforcing the law. And apparently growing up means you turn into someone like Governor Newsom, who is a sleazebag. We knew that already. It was inevitable that he was going to do what he's doing, and so now it's time to hold him accountable. Meanwhile, the Defense Secretary Hegseth has slammed Newsom, stating that the U.S. will protect its federal officers if the California governor will not. And it is clear that there's a clear and present danger to these officers who have been attacked, with whom these rioters are interfering with. And, you know, they've said here, Hegseth has said, due to increased threats to federal law enforcement officers in federal buildings, approximately 700 active duty U.S. Marines from Camp Pendleton are being deployed to Los Angeles to restore order. We have an obligation to defend federal law enforcement officers, even if Gavin Newsom will not. And they're trained. These Marines are trained in de-escalation, crowd control, and standing rules for the use of force. And you can bet that the use of force rules will not allow those guys to sit there and have happen what happened in Portland, where they threw Molotov cocktails, ball bearings, shined laser lights in their eyes, threw concrete shakes at them, and various other forms of attack. And there are officers, federal marshals, who suffered eye damage and other injuries back in 2020 in Portland because they took no action. Kate Brown didn't take action, and neither did the mayor at that time, Ted Wheeler. By the way, this isn't the only thing that's happening right now. In addition to the response from the administration, the media is out there slandering and taking a very anti-law enforcement stance in their reporting. A former senior FBI official who his name's Chris Pahota, slammed the media on Monday for what he deemed as anti-law enforcement position amid ongoing riots. I've seen, especially over the last 4 years in the previous administration and even during the Obama years, the media has taken a very anti-law enforcement position. That position has been very, very well orchestrated and spread so that our government and its officials are no longer what I would call single sources of authoritative information. And then, of course, he proceeded to talk some more about, the context of what happened here. But, I watched some of the media reports from the non-Fox News, non-Newsmax sources, and it's horrifying what these people in the media are saying. They're literally amplifying a message that's coming directly from Democrats themselves. And let me give you two examples. Maxine Waters, who, always has to jump in and say the dumbest things you can think of. A Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman, Tricia McLaughlin, on Monday blasted California Democrat Representative Maxine Waters for spewing, quote, lies, unquote, about the ongoing protests in Los Angeles and, quote, taunting, unquote, members of the National Guard. Waters attempted to enter a Los Angeles detention facility over the weekend by invoking her status as a lawmaker, but was denied entry by a National Guard member who told her to check with public affairs. The Congresswoman also allegedly yelled at National Guard members who were stationed on the street. By the way, these are fellow Californians who are doing what they are ordered to do in protecting and securing these facilities. And she asked them if they plan to, quote, shoot her, unquote. Waters later said she was pleading with the guardsmen not to shoot anyone. I'm sorry, they're going to have all this on video. She's a liar. She's a complete liar. And she is taunting people. the spokeswoman for DHS said she should be using her voice to diffuse the situation in Los Angeles rather than adding to the tension. The safety and security of DH personnel, ICE agents, and those in our custody remain our top priority. Instead of taunting National Guard members, the Congresswoman should be trying to diffuse the violent riots. Elected officials need to tone down their dangerous rhetoric about ICE law enforcement. And McLaughlin also slammed Maxine Waters for lying about the situation after Waters claimed on the Communist News Network, CNN, that the protests were, quote, very small and very peaceful, and there was no animosity, unquote. She said this morning on and McLaughlin said she spewed lies about these riots as not being violent. The American people can see with their own eyes. The rioters have assaulted law enforcement officers, thrown rocks, burned American flags, set cars on fire, slashed tires, defaced buildings, and taxpayer-funded property. The violent targeting of law enforcement in Los Angeles by lawless rioters is despicable, and Congresswoman Waters must call for it to end. So that's what you get when you get a Democrat Congresswoman. It gets worse, actually, because there is a very bizarre congressional representative. Her name is, let me see if I can find it here. Representative Norma Torres. She posted on TikTok on Friday during the riots, and she reacting to the riots and the upscale of law enforcement. And here's what she said. She said, "Get the F out of Los Angeles." She's telling ICE and the National Guard, which the National Guard's from California, telling them to get the F out of Los Angeles so that order can be restored. See, that's how Democrats restore order. They actually foment a violent riot, call it peaceful, try to justify it, and then once things are absolutely complete chaos and no action is being taken to quell these riots or hold people accountable for the crimes they're committing, they say, all you have to do is leave and not enforce anything at all, and it will all get better. She is, to say the least, one of the most bizarre people that you could imagine. And in this very strange post on X, which you can see in the article I just posted there. The group that is at the center of the anti-ICE protests is funded by the state of California and the federal government. Federal funding, however, was terminated by the Trump administration, but the state of California is actually providing extensive funding to the group that is organizing these protests. And how do I know they're organizing? Because that's what they said they're doing. The progressive activist group, Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, CHIRLA, they staged one of the first Los Angeles rallies last week protesting the ICE raids. And it's in part sparked by the arrest of a service employee or SEIU international president who was accused of obstructing immigration warrants. That didn't sound like labor organizing. That sounds like obstructing law enforcement. So they should throw the book at that dude. And they rallied alongside other member groups of the LA Rapid Response Network. That's right, you heard it. A group calling themselves the LA Rapid Response Network, and SEIU, and the LA Teachers Union. That's right. Someone who's supposed to be educating kids is busy fomenting violent riots. And they say that they belong there. They say no to deportations, no to mass detentions, which the American people quite clearly voted for in the last election. And there are documents that have already been obtained that show that CHIRLA received a significant portion of its recent operating budget from both the state and the federal government for immigration services, of course, prior to the Trump administration. Here's how much money they received. They received $33,966,522, including $32,562,542, or 96% of their funding from the state of California. Maybe this is what Gavin Newsom should be arrested for if he signed that into law and he's still sending him money. He's funding a riot. He's funding it. Biden administration also awarded two, quote, citizenship and integration grants, unquote, to the organization in 2023. Smaller money, $193K. They were slated to receive $450,000 more before that grant was terminated by President Trump. This is just amazing. And the thing is, this group and others are big on Act Blue, which is a organization that raises money for Democrats. It's essentially the Democrat fundraising committee. And Act Blue is, supposed to be a legitimate fundraising entity. But if they're actually involved with this activity, Act Blue was already in trouble for allowing foreign donations which is completely illegal, foreign donations to Democrat candidates for office. In addition, now this group is also receiving funding via Act Blue. I think we're nearing the point where it's time to jump in and find out who's behind all of this stuff and kind of bring these groups to heel entirely. And I think, I thought I had here we go. And a key congressman a Republican congressman is urging the Department of Justice and Congress to identify the potential funding and organizing of the Los Angeles riots. At a minimum, there's some people directly involved with funding this. And I think that's ripe for RICO statute. And this will, by the way, send a message to everybody else who thinks this is a bright idea, what they're doing in Los Angeles, and everybody else who aids and abets this activity, that they may find themselves part of RICO prosecutions, because it is racketeering and corrupt organization activity to do this. I think they should do that with Antifa. And I'm pretty sure that someone's probably busy doing that already. But these guys have stepped up. And they also, by the way, let's see, Mark Harris has said it's also very clear that Antifa has shown up to be a part of these riots. And he mentions, of course, the Act Blue funding that's going into this. So I think these guys, if they want to engage in this illegal and corrupt activity to commit a whole range of crimes, including what's turned into fomenting a rebellion and interfering with federal law enforcement, and then threatening and attacking federal law enforcement and federal facilities, I say, you know what? It's time for them to face the full brunt of the law. And Laurie, that's a good point. I'm going to talk about Tina Kotek in just a second. And the rumor is it's not Ron Wyden, but Jeff Merkley. I'll talk about that here in a moment. Here was a story that, I don't know, this just seems like a Babylon Bee headline, but it's an actual report on Just the News. A Minnesota state lawmaker has actually confessed that she's an illegal immigrant. Minnesota state representative on Monday admitted to being an illegal alien during remarks on the state house floor and said her father had misrepresented his familial relations in the paperwork. Said, my father, as the one processing the paperwork, put my grandmother down as his mother. So I am an illegal in this country. My parents are illegally here in this country, she said proudly. And she made her remarks while discussing illegal immigration eligibility for public health care, so they can all have free health care, courtesy of people who are struggling to pay for their own health care that are citizens. And of course, the video footage of her saying this has gone viral. And uh, there are calls for her arrest. Because she knew she was an illegal immigrant. She knew that there was fraud involved, and of course she cannot serve uh, in any capacity in government as an illegal immigrant. But look, these are the same people waving Mexican flags everywhere, and they think it's a brilliant strategy. I say they keep it up, and we will find out just how brilliant a strategy that is. There's a very interesting similarity between what we're hearing from 2020 Ted Wheeler and what we're hearing now from Democrats in California. It's almost like a search and replace on the quote that we're seeing, and it's amazing because I don't know who thought that was actually a really great strategy the first time around, but let me see if I can find this because I think it was on Oregon Watchdog, and so I'm going to go see if I can't find that because it was an excellent way of laying out the whole picture, the context of what's going on. It's that we're seeing you could take a quote from Ted Wheeler in 2020, a quote from Gavin Newsom, and a quote from Karen Bass, and it's the same. Except I think the scale might be even larger when you're talking about Los Angeles. So let's have at it. I will try to find that and post that for you because I know I saw it, and it really. Oh yeah, here it is. Oh no, that's another article, but it's this is Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris blaming Trump for the riots, which started before he ever took any action to respond. And they claim because ICE is doing its job, they somehow deserve to be rioted against. Let's see. Yeah. Here are some pictures that you might not have seen of the activity that's taking place down in Los Angeles. I will post that. That is quite something. And let's see here. But see, in 1965, it was the Democrats who were on the wrong side of that as well. So I guess we maybe shouldn't be super surprised. And yeah, I'm scanning here. I haven't found it yet. I'm sorry, but it's a great article. And sometimes they're just a little bit hard to track down after a few days as to where they went. But it's a great article, and it was in I think it was the Oregon Catalyst is where it was. So I'll try to find that and post it later. And as I said, the Democrats' response is to egg on the rioters, call them peaceful, justify what they're doing, taunt, and lie about the federal law enforcement, and then sue to stop any enforcement activity to protect federal officers. This is what they're doing, and I guess shouldn't be terribly surprised because here's another example of something that's happening right here in Oregon. Portland State University places a professor on leave after a video shows her saying, quote, "I am Hamas," unquote. The PSU's president condemned the statement as reprehensible. And but the statement was, "I am Hamas. We are all Hamas." And she made it clear, and I think this is in the era of Trump, where you could lose a lot of funding as a university very quickly if you support that type of activity. PSU stands unequivocally against anti-Semitism, terrorism, and hate of any kind. The statement, including the statements made in this video. Good for her. Good for her for standing up for this. You can see this statement in its entirety on a Willamette Week article, which also there's a YouTube video embedded in it. That's what Democrats are doing. That's what they stand for. Shifting back to Oregon here a little bit, and we'll talk about Kate Brown shortly, but Trump is there's a number of things going on here in Oregon. Trump says that he has launched an investigation through the Justice Department of Oregon's election rolls, and says the United States Department of Justice has issued a, quote, statement of interest, unquote, in the Oregon Elections Office and their problems. And as we know, they had loads of non-citizen voters that they found on the rolls, so much so that they shut down automatic voter registration just before the election last fall, just before the voter registration deadline. And who knows how many people actually got through and voted, but they're not talking. But the feds are going to make them talk, and I think it's great. So, of course, OPB runs interference for them, and I think this is going to be a very, very interesting opportunity to get to the bottom of some of the stuff that's happening here in Oregon. Just transparency. Just tell the truth. Just show it all. And answer every question completely. And, of course, under oath. There's a rumor that Senator Merkley continues to avoid a question on whether he will run again in 2026. And, of course, if he doesn't run again, then it's assumed he's retiring at that point. There was an interview on KATU with Senator Merkley that shows that he's just avoiding answering that question. And now everybody is speculating that he will not run again, which sets up in Oregon a big contest for 2026. And it also explains something with the Democrats. They've been shoving through a bill through the state legislature that its purpose is to restore what existed decades ago of the ability of the governor, which has been a Democrat for decades, to appoint a replacement rather than hold a special election to fill the seat. They would appoint a replacement, and then the election for Senate would be held on the next general election to see if they can continue to, or someone else can continue to complete that term. They shoved it through. Gee, I wonder why after all these years. So, they're constantly working the system behind the scenes. They're not telling the truth because they know that it'd make it harder to maybe pass that bill potentially. That's what they're doing. So stay tuned, because if Jeff Merkley decides after all these years of being a fake moderate that he's turned into a Bernie bro and now he's gone off the left end of the scale, it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the state of Oregon in 2026 with regard to that Senate seat. A third version of the gas tax package has been made public in the last 100 hours, and here are the details. And the gas tax is part of a transportation package the Democrats are trying to pass. It would raise the gas tax by 15 cents from 40 cents to 55. It would raise the payroll tax by 300%, from 0.1% to 0.3% to pay for bus services everywhere, which, as you've seen, many of those buses are largely empty. So, why are we paying more? It will raise vehicle title fees by $70, which it's already quite expensive. It raises the auto registration fees by $50. It doubles the tax on new cars from 1% to 2%. 2%. It's a sales tax is what it is. They call it a privilege tax, as I recall. Privilege. Creates a new tax on used cars of 1%. So a previously non-existent tax on used cars must now be paid. Gee, all of that's called inflation. All of it's making it harder for people to get by. And I can promise you that none of it will go to improving roads. No, I don't think Merkley will run for governor. I don't. I think that there's too many other eager beavers that would jump in on that. Plus, is he going to run against Tina Kotek? I don't think don't think he's going to do that. Tina Kotek would have to say she's not running again, and that seems pretty far off at this point. Democrats don't let go of power unless they're absolutely forced to, or a poll tells them they're completely screwed, and that's not the case at this point. A article that's more Democrat favorable from OPB, Dirk Vanderhart, says Oregon Democrats' proposals for major transportation legislation is fueled by increases in gas taxes and fees. So there's a lot happening with that. There was some talk that they were also going to do something with the cap and trade legislation that passed and the laws under Kate Brown. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see if there's any more developments. Representative Shelley Bosshart Davis said that, because she's the co-chair of the Transportation Committee, said she'd only seen the proposal because it was submitted to a Clackamas County Planning Board on Thursday evening. In other words, they aren't even sharing it with legislators, but they sent it to a Clackamas County Planning Board, and she said that the process is outrageous and sloppy. Mark Meek, another committee member, said he only saw the summary for the first time. He's a Democrat. After it made its way to him Friday morning. He said, I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for a transportation package to come out, just not like this. So even Democrats are saying this sucks. And there's a lot of people who are concerned, he said, how it'll impact their personal economy. And those are the things I'm waiting to hear from them, he said. That's why I was hoping to have it rolled out sooner. Gorsuch, the chair of the committee and key author of the plan, ultimately shared the summary with committee members shortly before 10 a.m. on Friday. So the Oregon Department of Transportation said it will need to eliminate 1,000 positions if it doesn't get roughly $350 million more in the next 2-year budget. Do that math. But the department said it will need a far larger amount to ensure the state's highways are in good condition. Well, they're not doing that now with the money they've got. It's pretty obvious. Counties and cities, too, say a major funding package focused on routine maintenance, not large flashy projects like a bill lawmakers passed in 2017 is necessary. The roads in fair condition will turn poor and will pay more in repairs and replacement later, a document from the cities and counties said, adding that the state risks more potholes, higher vehicle repair costs, and decreased speeds on damaged pavement. Yeah. That's what you get when you get transportation legislation from the Democrats. Stay tuned for that one, but do let people know what they think. By the way, here's Governor Kotek. There's some news on her activities lately. You might recall I talked about how there was this string of anti-Asian burglaries in the Eugene area, Eugene, Springfield. And there was a person who had fled to Texas, and the governor was refusing, because apparently he's an illegal immigrant, I guess, who was refusing to call for their extradition. And now, and because there's an ICE retainer on this person, but the Asian American community leaders put a lot of pressure on Kotek, and apparently she has decided to give in and call for that extradition. It was just a request. It still has to be fulfilled, and the governor was dragging her heels on it. So, Lane County's DA has been all over this for a while, and Chris Peroza, and he's actually a pretty good guy. He's a pro law enforcement guy, but stymied by the governor, which tells you kind of everything you need to know about Kate Brown as far as law enforcement, where she's truly at. Meanwhile, Tina Kotek and Democrat governors are backing Newsom's play, calling for Trump's use of California's National Guard as, quote, an alarming abuse of power, unquote. Well, you know what? Don't do what Newsom's doing, and it won't happen in your state. But if you leave federal facilities vulnerable to attack and federal personnel as well, expect the same. Duh. And so, anyway, this is Tina Kotek sounding off. Now you know where she's coming from. You can expect, by the way, all these things the Democrats are saying to encourage not just rioters in Los Angeles, but everywhere. And they should bear direct responsibility for this. They're inciting riots. And, you know, Portland Mayor Keith Wilson, however, did remark on the unrest and what's happening in LA. He said, "We're always monitoring, but the focus is on caring for our undocumented community, making sure everyone's protected. We hope it doesn't, but we're monitoring it." What about the citizen community? I'd like to know does he have anything to say for them? You know, the ones that are assaulted by the hardened criminals that are being removed by these ICE raids. By the way, the Democrat Governors Association and all the people who signed on to this is a who's who of the leftist nut jobs that are running Democrat states. You can read all of them here, if you like, in this article. Meanwhile, there's more news about the Department of Justice. They've charged another Chinese researcher with smuggling biological materials into the U.S. A new case accuses a Chinese researcher, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, his last name is Han, I can do that, of trying to smuggle packages containing concealed biological material related to worms, roundworms, into the country by sending multiple packages that contain the material to a lab in the U.S. It's illegal to do that. And then he made false statements about what the material was, and so now he's digging a deeper hole. This comes on the heels of two researchers that were charged for smuggling a fungus that could serve as a potential agro-terrorism weapon, and also cause reproductive issues for females in the United States. And it's an act of war if the government of China is at all connected with instigating this. And so they've got their hands full. This is the mess that's been unleashed on our country during the Brandon administration that now is finally being responded to, and thank God that it is. I got a few more stories to share that I think you'll find interesting before we wrap up here tonight. Here's some positive news. Fear of inflation fell in May, according to the New York Federal Reserve survey. This fear of inflation that often drives inflation because it causes people to behave in such a way that they are concerned that future inflation will cause higher prices later. The one-year inflation outlook decreased by 0.4%, down from 3.2% in April. So in other words, people are starting to calm down. The Democrats hyping the tariff stuff, which hasn't had any meaningful impact on inflation in the United States at all. And inflation, which was already starting to come down from the Brandon administration years, along with the stuff President Trump's doing to alleviate inflation, particularly with regard to energy, which drives just about every sector of inflation. We're seeing improvement in this. And then add to that the deregulation that's being done en masse by the federal government, and we're going to see a reduction in inflation. And the expectations are starting to catch up. The Democrat media machine has been lying about this. They can lie for a while, but it doesn't really last that long. Interestingly enough, here's a piece of political news relating to the economy and the impact on the GOP. There's a CNN segment talking about a poll that shows a surprise result among voters on the economy. It's a surprise to CNN and a surprise to everybody who was believing what the Democrats and the left-wing media were saying. Despite big swings in the stock market and tariff uncertainties, voters are standing by the Republican Party by plus 8 percentage points. That is almost negligible difference from the very favorable plus 11 back in November before President Trump took office and the new Congress came in, which means that voters believe that Republicans are going to deliver a better economy, And now they're starting to become less concerned about inflation. This is good news because it means that voters can see through the BS and the lies of the Democrats and the left-wing media. Little Portland news to add to this, which I think kind of makes, I'm going to get a chuckle from this. The mayor of Portland is actually standing by a very improbable pledge that he made during his campaign last year to end unsheltered homelessness this year. He says, we're on target. I'm optimistic. Now, this is June, so he's halfway through the year. And this is in a city where the lack of housing options, they say, for people ready to leave shelter, and the fact that homelessness has actually increased every month since at least January of 2024. But the mayor says he's standing firm. He's invited Mitch Landrieu, the former mayor of New Orleans, an advisor to President Biden, to speak to local officials. And apparently this is going to somehow impress people after all the great work that Biden did. Remember that? Yeah, me neither. On reducing homelessness. And so this breaks it down by the numbers, and I think that homelessness is a total misnomer because when they continue to solve the wrong problem, they aren't going to get less of it. You know what I mean? And so this is Keith Wilson. The jury's out on him. He's a businessman. He has to play the happy talk with the left and talk about housing first. But as long as he does that and doesn't do something directly about the drug addiction, the drug trafficking, and the crime, as well as the trash and the vandalism, then I think people aren't going to feel any differently about Portland, and they're not going to feel good about him if he doesn't get his act together. Because just sticking a drug addict in a housing facility doesn't solve anything, and most of them will just leave and go out and do drugs in the street anyway. They've said it, and a huge percentage of them are not from Portland. They are from somewhere else because they knew they could do whatever they want here. And they still largely get away with it. By the way, the lessons learned by Portland officials. I talked last week about Prosper Portland and how I discovered buried in an article about Prosper Portland that they had in fact diverted in the budget, the upcoming budget, $2 million from the Portland police to protect and secure parks to this Prosper Portland organization to keep funding them. And what's fascinating is this is defunding the police, which you thought they would have learned about. And so now the mayor is starting to weigh in on this because it was the city council that did this. And the city council is apparently still debating the $2 million diversion, but it's defunding police that they expect are going to go and make sure the parks are safe, and they aren't because they're full of homeless people and drug needles all over the place, and so this is what Portland is still doing. This is what the new city council, the ranked choice multi-member district voting, the disaster that we talked about last year, this is what they're doing. And it's a fiery dispute, apparently, because the top public safety official in Portland, Bob Cossey, has issued a 7-page memo that spelled out what the police bureau may lose if the city council succeeds at shifting the $2 million. So the debate is afoot, and it should be. And the police chief is that said that these monuments are not in the police budget, and they the list of things that they will be losing is the ability to rely on overtime to crack down on street racing, car theft, and shoplifting. Isn't that interesting? Shoplifting. So, I think the car thieves, the shoplifters, and the street racers are going to figure this out, and they're going to do stuff at night because there won't be police paid to do that at night because they've cut the budget. So, anyway, if it feels like deja vu all over again, it is. And these morons say they are not cutting the police. We're giving additional funding that no bureau was given. That's what they're claiming, even though they actually had a vote in an amendment to do exactly what I just said. And so, plus, don't forget the cost of living for police officers goes up. Inflation to do their job for all the materials that they require goes up. And now that will cause them alone to be 1 million short of what they need just to maintain the current level of service right off the top. And as they put it in this memo here, it's just math. And apparently some of these people aren't very good at math. Hey, so that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about in the show tonight. I did want to give a plug for something. If you have Newsmax, which you should be able to get on most TV providers, or you can just buy it directly, check out a show which I think I haven't got to watch yet, but I've heard about it. It sounds very, very good. It's a show called Grid Down, Power Up. It premiered this past Sunday at 9 p.m. on Newsmax. Actor Dennis Quaid is the narrator for it, and he's big on this. And he shows how an event could be deadly and lead to life-threatening shortages of heat, food, and water if protective measures are not taken. He said it'll be the next 9/11, the next Pearl Harbor. I think it would dwarf both of those by far, and it would be damage to the nation's electrical infrastructure because not just because of physical and cyber attacks, but geomagnetic disturbances and electromagnetic pulse, which would be an intentional act by a foreign nation. And he explains this and then interviews people and talks about it. And they actually know that the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians have in their war plans in a first strike to take out our electrical grid. And that's one of the reasons why Iran must not have a nuclear weapon, and why we actually have to make sure that the Chinese and the Russians know just how we're not going to allow them to engage in that activity either. Which, by the way, Kim Jong-un has literally threatened an EMP attack and has nuclear weapons. We should actually be taking better security measures here. And I hope we do. I think it's probably the single greatest threat because it's the one that would literally kill more people faster and take down the country in a way that we're not ready for at all, than anything else I can think of that is at all likely to happen. And it's relatively easy compared to almost everything else you can think of. It quotes comedian George Carlin in the film, who says, "You ever stop and realize how fragile all this is? It wouldn't take much to throw us back into barbaric times. All you'd have to do would be to eliminate electricity." It's not only weak, but it's easy to take out, as well as many of the devices connected to it. And we're just not ready, and we should be. If we're a serious 21st century nation that expects to survive, don't let this Achilles heel continue to exist. So hats off to Dennis Quaid for doing this. Thanks, everyone, for watching the show here tonight. And please share the show with everyone you can. They just don't know all this stuff, and they probably haven't heard it all in one place, and they certainly haven't heard the kind of opinion we share here on the Captive Audience 4 nights a week between myself, Sunny Danforth, and Don. And going forward, we're going to have more guests. I can promise you that. Anyway, have a great night, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Captive Audience. Good night.